Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Library of Congress Oral History Project, capably run and wonderfully run by Dennis Daly of our Public Library History Department. And today we're going to be talking to Jerry Burns. And Jerry, you and I have just become friends.
We have
and
indeed.
By George, it's just wonderful to meet great people and people that you've never stumbled over before. and here we are talking like old pals, which I look forward to for years. Anyway, nevertheless, where were you born, Jerry?
In Enon, Ohio.
Oh my gosh.
It's in Clark County.
Yeah.
And Enon lies between Dayton and Springfield.
Right.
My grandmother and grandfather were both ordained Christian ministers, and had the church there. My grandfather was gone before I came along, but my grandmother, the Reverend Frankie Spriggs, when we used to go to revivals or that sort of thing, invariably the evangelist would remember Frankie Spriggs and call her out, and as a kid, you know,
Oh, sure.
that made your buttons pop.
Oh, yes, I should say. Now, you had brothers and sisters?
I had two brothers,
Two brothers.
both deceased, younger than I,
Oh,
but yes, two brothers.
yeah. Where'd you go to school? Elementary.
Well, I went to Gray School called Gray Hill in Springfield on Dayton Avenue, and from there I went to Snyder Park Junior High School, and from there to Springfield High School.
Springfield. Now, that's interesting because Enon is not too far from Springfield. But
5 miles. I've ridden it with my bike many times.
Is that so?
Oh, yes.
That's what I wanted to know. You weren't bussed in or anything like that.
No, I didn't live in Enon. We lived in Springfield.
You moved into the town.
But I had family who still lived in Enon, and the Enon Cemetery, which was right behind my uncle's home, we used to go and look at the tombstones and that. And of course, my grandparents, now my parents, and both my brothers are buried there.
How about that? Well, that must be, Clark County, that's pretty historic country.
Oh, it is. It is that.
Lots of background.
And there are items around that are worth visiting.
Oh, I bet.
The George Rogers Clark
Sure.
Park is there, but no.
And you got introduced to that sort of thing early on, I imagine, as a boy.
Oh, are you kidding? You know, Osborne, there used to be two cities, Fairfield and Osborne, and the significance of that is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
I didn't know about Osborne.
Well, Wright was in Fairfield, and Patterson was in Osborne.
Oh.
And Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which was the experimental point for the Air Force, after the 1913 flood, Osborne was washed away.
Oh,
And as kids, on a Sunday afternoon, I've had occasion to be there and go through where the foundations remained in this, in what had been a city. I have no idea what it is today, but Fairborn came from putting together Fairfield and Osborne.
For heaven's sake, well, how about that?
Yeah.
Boy, that's something to put in your trivia box.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting.
You know, that raises a point. There used to be experimental work, a lot of still experimental work done at Wright-Patterson.
Oh, yes.
And as a kid, I had an aunt and uncle who lived east of Wright-Patterson, and experimental things overhead. And sometimes they didn't make it back. Sometimes they came down in a farm.
Right.
And that's, well, you and I met, of course, when my son took me for a ride on the B-17.
Oh, my gosh.
And you know, I remember the B-17 as a big monster. And to get in that steel crate, and that's all it is, My hat's off to the fellows who did that.
I know it, and isn't it funny, as we grow older and older, and things that were big to us when we were kids, all of a sudden become very small.
Well, that's true, except that that isn't the only thing that happened. Those birds that fly have gotten bigger and bigger. I remember when I first got on a DC-10, I told Betty, I said, you know, I have the impression of where are they moving this place?
Well, now tell us about high school. Springfield High.
Well, Springfield High, while I was in Springfield High, I had an experience. I had tutored people in algebra at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
But in my senior year, one of the teachers, Mr. Schaefer, was gassed in his laboratory. So, and there were no replacements. So my senior year, I taught the chemistry that I had taken in my junior year.
You were brilliant.
No, I wasn't brilliant. I was just, they didn't have anybody. If you get desperate enough, you scrape the bottom of the barrel. But that was a great experience.
Oh, God.
I still remember one particular gal that when I had to put out grades, of course I knew these, you know, I knew my students.
They were your schoolmates.
They were my schoolmates. And I had to tell her she was not making her grade. That was rough.
Boy,
And then that summer, I taught chemistry to nurses at Springfield Hospital.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
That's how desperate it was, which reminds me as a side.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and Enid, Ohio. During the war in Enid, Ohio, the same room would be rented 3 times, one for each 8-hour shift, so that people could come and sleep and then go back to work. That was a part of the war effort.
Yeah.
And the same room was occupied by 3 different unrelated people.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, boy. I
You
know
think of lots of things.
people today, you know, don't know things like that.
No,
The younger generations,
no.
of course.
That was then and this is now.
Yeah.
So my years at Springfield High were good.
Did you
and
play sports? Did you play sports?
I ran on track.
Oh, good.
I don't know that I was particularly good, but I ran. But I was using a choral group of some sort. And
Did you like music?
yes, I do like music. And when I left Springfield High, I had a scholarship to Wittenberg College.
Okay.
But when I was to enter Wittenberg, that was the day I was drafted. And they gave me 21 days, you know, the 21 days
Sure.
before you report.
Pull things together.
So I was sworn in on the first day of September in '43. And 22nd day of September, I reported to Fort Hays.
4 days. Columbus.
Was sent from there. Interesting, because I had done some performing, and at lunchtime, they asked for volunteer performance, and I did not volunteer to perform, but there were enough fellows there from Springfield at that point in time that they fingered me, and so I ended up doing some singing at lunch, which of course gave me a ticket to Air Force, to Navy, to Army. And I did not do Navy. You were a Navy guy.
Yeah.
I didn't do Navy because I get motion sick.
Oh, I see.
Used to be on an elevator, I would walk down because it would get to me.
Oh, my gosh.
So Navy was out. There was no
Right.
question I was not going to do Navy.
No
But I
way.
would have done Air Force. And as a matter of fact, came down to Cincinnati to, I think it was the V5 program for
Sure, maybe.
pilots.
Right.
And,
was it.
but I failed on eyesight.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that the thing it wasn't coming down on the train and having the countryside go waving by me.
Also,
But I was already wearing glasses, so
well, and it's interesting, you know, things like that happen in a person's life, And you never know what kind of an influence on your life that change had made.
No, and you never know
What would have
this.
happened if, what? You know?
My heart goes out to people who say, if I'd only done.
Yes.
That's not true.
Can't.
Because you come to a fork in the road and it goes like so, and you never know what the fork was you didn't take.
That's right.
A block away, you might have fallen off the precipice.
That's
So
right.
forget that.
Forget that.
Live today
Yep.
and enjoy. It doesn't pay to stew about what might have been.
Exactly.
I'd like to win the lottery.
Exactly. Why, sure. Listen, I want to go back just a bit and ask
Sure.
a question. Your presence there during the experimental days of aircraft, did you ever see the Wright brothers?
I never did. My grandfather knew them.
Oh, he did?
My grandfather, as a minister,
Sure.
used to go into their bicycle shop.
Oh, my
And he
gosh.
knew both the Wright brothers.
Isn't that something?
But no,
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to go up there and see it today, how they've restored it beautifully there at the park, at the historic.
I have not been there.
You should go
It's so close to us here, and I have
know
not
it,
been
I
there.
know it. That's what we do sometimes, you know.
I should do that. I really should
It
do that.
really is, it is amazing. Okay, so now we're up to the point of where you were inducted into the Army.
Right.
Right. Foot soldier.
Well, foot soldier, field artillery, it turned out for
Field
me.
artillery.
The
Tell us about
the 63rd Infantry Division was formed as a result of Roosevelt and Churchill's meeting in Casablanca. And the 63rd Infantry Division was established to ensure that the Axis would bleed and burn. And the insignia was a sword with blood on it,
Yes.
to bleed and burn.
That
63rd
long
Infantry
dagger,
Division.
yeah.
And I was fortunate to be a part of that division.
That was a historic.
Went to the 863rd Field Artillery Battalion, Battery B.
All right. Now listen, I want you to tell before you go, you've used the term Axis, and that to a lot of people, they think of an axis like on a wheel or something.
At that point, it was Italy and Germany.
Okay.
And the meeting in Casablanca, of course, predated the actions in North Africa and ultimately Italy.
Sicily and Italy, yeah.
But
Right.
yes, that was the genesis of
Well,
the 63rd.
it had such a to us it had such a strong meaning because there was Hitler on one end and Mussolini on the other,
No question,
and it was really,
no question.
yeah, people could look that up and it's kind of in it. Okay, so now where did you train with the 63rd?
Macomb, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
The 63rd Infantry Division was a Camp Van Dorn. And Ted, we described it as just outside the U.S. It was, and we dug more foxholes in Mississippi than we dug in Europe. And we'd go out on bivouac, be rained out and come home and dry out enough that you could go again. But
That must have been a real shaking up experience for a boy from Ohio.
it was, it was a different experience. And the racial situation then was interesting.
Yeah.
My dad came to visit me. My mother was deceased, of course, by that time. My dad came to visit me. And walking along the streets of Macomb, some gentleman made a comment to him about some black gentlemen who were walking along the sidewalk. And apparently they didn't step off for him. And the comment was, the day will come, we'll straighten this out, kind of thing. And
Wow.
from where we came,
Yeah.
that was
Very alien.
that was alien because in Ohio we had black and white friends, but in that day that wasn't true in Mississippi.
No, isn't it?
But it was still a great experience to be at Van Dorn, and with artillery.
Yep.
We were an artillery battery, and I was in what is called a detail section. you do the survey, the fire direction, that kind of thing. And I was good in math,
Sure.
so
You knew triangulation.
so that worked very well. And we could direct fire. As a matter of fact, the summer of 44, I guess it was, we went to Fort Sill, the artillery school in Oklahoma. We went to Fort Sill as school troops for the summer. Spent a 3-month stint there before returning to Mississippi and packing our bags to head for Europe.
Traveled by train.
Traveled by train, and on the day after Christmas in 1944, you know, I really got in the action very late in the game. But the day after Christmas, the train stopped in Springfield. Of course, there was no way of communicating with family or anything, just to look out and see Springfield.
Oh, God.
As we were traveling through.
How about that?
And we went to the East Coast, and
Where did you embark?
from Fort Dix
Fort Dix.
in New Jersey.
Yeah. Big transport?
Went on the George Washington,
Oh, yeah.
but recognize that for me, a rowboat is bad enough. You get, and that didn't help things very much.
Oh, my gosh, on the Atlantic.
I had a devil of a time. Well, and this was, the George Washington was deemed to be fast enough that you had no escort.
Right.
It went on its own. And to my knowledge, we didn't see any subs, if any subs were seen.
Right.
You know, I knew nothing about it. I had enough difficulty trying to keep whatever went into my stomach keep down.
together.
Oh, it was terrible.
Oh, it was terrible.
But
Yeah.
we landed in, I guess we landed in Marseille. And went in the line, up near Nancy, France, with the 7th Army in any case,
You were with the Senate.
with General Patch's 7th Army.
Yeah.
We were placed in the line and, of course, into action right away.
Sure.
Right away. And it was winter time,
Oh, boy.
and things I remember, you sleep out on the ground, of course, stretch canvas and your sleeping bags on it. I've taken a bath in a helmet full of water by a bonfire. And that's pretty chilly. Only I don't remember that part of it, but I remember how crazy that must have been.
Oh, my goodness.
But that's what we did.
Well, sure. Absolutely. Well, you know, speaking of that, of course, the great World War II cartoonist Bill Malden.
Oh, yes.
And drawing pictures of Willie and Joe, and exactly what you experienced.
It's exactly that. It was real.
Oh,
And
yeah.
but everybody did it, and you know that's what it was, and we took it in stride. Of course, we were younger then.
Yes, yes, yes.
We were younger then.
And you know, it was, most people with whom I speak and feeling myself, it was a great experience.
Oh, totally different.
Wouldn't have traded it for anything.
It obviously changed our lives in ways we have no appreciation. But I wouldn't take anything from my military service. It was the totality of it was really great for me.
Right. And did you have a sense of homeland support, people back home? Tell us about that.
I met a fellow from Eastern Ohio, Ralph
Steubenville?
Early. I know I should be able to call where, because visited his home after the war. Dad and I went over and visited the family. But his mom used to send caramels, homemade caramels,
Oh, God.
which was great. Of course, I didn't have a mom to send things,
Yeah.
but hey, there was no question. We were all in the show together, including the people
Yes.
back home.
Yes.
And you heard about the things they were doing and the things they didn't have.
Yes.
the rationing and so forth, and what it took to make things go. Hey, it takes a lot of effort to build 50,000 airplanes in a year, okay? And my dad had gone to Auburn, New York from the Springfield factory of International Harvester. He had gone to be a part of a special group in Auburn, New York, in a piece of the war effort.
Sure.
So all of the, yeah, hey, everything about it. We're a better people for it. And the tragedy is today, we've got some clowns
Yes.
on the Washington scene and elsewhere who just don't understand. They haven't been there. They don't appreciate. They badmouth. It's tragic that we have that going on.
Yeah, it really is. It really is sad. And our terrible lapses in education and educating the younger generations as they came along.
Bad news.
We've blown it so badly.
Yeah.
Well, now listen, there you are in France. Well, going across, and then you went past Gibraltar to go into the
Yes, we did.
Mediterranean.
Yes, we
Pillars
did.
of Hercules, all that kind
We
of
did
stuff.
that. We did indeed that.
Wow.
We landed in Marseille
Those
and
sites must have been something.
up the Rhone River Valley. Yes, we did.
Now, under General Patch, you mentioned, of course, the massive forces that we had there, and the infantry and the artillery. What kind of armament were you in charge of?
105s.
105.
105 howitzers, and of
stuff.
course, being a part of the instrument section, as we moved from place to place, we got to the point that we surveyed from the captain's command car.
Really?
We take a compass and direction and how far did we go that way, and that gave you a rough calculation. We were a good battery from the standpoint of starting to fire from a new position very quickly, because we'd already done the calculations and ready to go. And of course, that was my job. I was the guy who did the math work. And
Sure. Boy, that's really something. And I know that whoever sees this DVD of you are going to be so appreciative of the way you describe things. With the situation and the weather and everything, and of course that was one of the most, according to historians, one of the most desperate winters in Europe ever, 1944 into 45. And by the time you got, how far north did you get into France?
how far north?
Did you get to the Ardennes?
No, did not get that. Above Nancy.
Okay.
And Nancy, and the reason I know Nancy, France, because I ended up in the hospital there.
Oh.
But we went into the line, I'll say in the vicinity of Alsace-Lorraine.
Oh. Northeast.
And I'm surprised that I don't recall precisely, but but I don't.
Then you headed east toward Germany?
Oh yes, of course we went into Germany, and shooting our way as we went, of course, and it was during that I was a corporal in the instrument section.
2 stripes.
And of course had a staff sergeant, also from Ohio, headed our unit. But an officer an observer in Battery C, our sister battery, the sergeant with him, you hit the dirt when stuff started to come in, and the sergeant hit the dirt on a mine, and of course killed him instantly. And the lieutenant the lieutenant just couldn't cope with, and so he had to be replaced.
Really?
So
Goodness.
I was the fellow
You were next.
who got to be immediately a second lieutenant
My goodness. Field
and an artillery
commission.
forward observer, moving from Battery B to Battery C to take over this job. We worked with
Wow.
the we worked with the 255th Infantry, and so I went back to Mossbach, Germany, on the 8th of April, was discharged on the 7th, and re-enlisted on the 8th. So that my old serial number, 35227-910, that I had enlisted man,
Yeah.
became 020-91760 as an officer. So I have two serial numbers.
Well, wait a minute now. You got discharged and then you re-enlisted?
All in the same,
In the
the day
same-
after, you see, the 8th of April,
Yeah.
yeah. We went back to Mossbach, Germany that morning, and I was officially discharged and officially,
And that wasn't even VE Day yet.
no, this was before VE Day.
Yeah, that is
Roosevelt had not
May.
died.
That's right.
He did not die till the 12th. But interesting thing that happened on VE Day. The closest I came to being hit in any way was have shrapnel fall on my back. That's the closest I came. I was richly blessed. But one incident that occurred, the sergeant and I split the radio packs. One of them weighed, as I recall, 52 pounds, the other weighed 54.
Wow.
But we split it and strapped it on in case, other than a backpack, that's what we used. But we got ourselves a long cable so that we didn't have to be exactly side by side. The only incident occurred was when we were walking along a road and stuff started to come in and we jumped. He jumped one way and I jumped the other, but I jumped in early enough that though he was much heavier than I, he landed on top of me.
Oh,
Crazy. But VE Day, I had ended up, nearly fell off of a tank because I had become ill with jaundice, hepatitis at jaundice.
really?
And I had gone to the hospital in Nancy, France. And on VE Day, I was on the first floor, and I wasn't allowed to leave my room. But the chaplain came, and we opened the window, and I crawled out, and he and I went down to the square in Nancy to see them raise the flags to full staff in celebration of VE Day, and lower them again to half staff because of Roosevelt's death. But the French flags, all the flags were treated in that fashion. So that was my experience on VE Day.
Memorable. And for people that don't quite know what VE means,
That was when
victory
the Axis
in Europe.
victory in Europe.
Axis.
That's when the Axis collapsed in Europe, and after that, I was being ready to go to the Far East as an observer, an airplane observer.
By this time, you were a second lieutenant.
I was a second lieutenant.
Yeah.
But I was given the choice. I couldn't come home with the 63rd, so they transferred me to the 100th Division, and I was with the 925th Field Artillery Battalion, headquarters battery there. But they gave me, because the 100th was coming home too. 63rd came home, the 100th came home, and as an officer, I didn't have enough points to go anyplace. So I was given a choice. I could either take a 2-week leave to Garmisch, great resort,
Right.
or I could transfer to Berlin. And I took the Berlin assignment.
Okay.
So I went to Berlin in 1945, and
Got to see the big city.
that too was an experience because
Tell us about it.
You know, riding the B-17,
Yeah.
the damage those fellows did to Berlin was unreal. And the Russian sector more than the French or the British, French, or U.S. sectors in Berlin. But devastation. One of the things that was spared was the SS compound. And we ended up, initially our headquarters when I went to Berlin, 1st Allied Airborne Army, and when I went in, I still see the colonel, the S1, saying, since you had experience as a motor officer, the junior officer in an artillery battery is the motor officer. That doesn't mean you know how to start a truck, but you're the motor officer. So, of course, that showed on my ammo. And he said, we're going to send you to the 111th Quartermaster Truck Battalion. So there I went, and the colonel was a fellow by the name of Thurber, who very shortly thereafter went to Stars and Stripes in Paris and invited me to go with him to Paris.
Same name as the...
But I did not, because I thought the experience probably was better in Berlin. And the fellow who came was Thomas B. Kellum. Kellum was a corporation lawyer from Austin, Texas. A cigar-smoking bulk of a fellow. And he had been the motor officer to keep Patton running in his dash across Europe. So that was his background, and he'd ended up with 111th Quartermaster Truck Battalion. And the colonel called me into his office and he said, Lieutenant, you are going to be my adjutant. And I will be out, I'll let you know where I'm going to be, but you're responsible for this headquarters. You know, at 20 years old, this isn't a bad deal.
I'll say not.
So I was the adjutant of this Quartermaster Truck Battalion. We had some 17 or 18 companies of German civilians, and we had 3 or 4 companies of U.S. troops. And the 111th provided all the supply intake to Berlin for both the government part of the operation and the military part of the operation, and also for our consulate in Poznan, Poland. So we had stuff coming in from all over Europe to supply, and that was the role of this Quartermaster Truck Battalion.
So you had contact with the Poles too, huh?
No, I did not.
Oh, you did?
No, I did not. I did not move from Berlin from the time I arrived till
What kind of accommodations did you have in Berlin?
That's interesting. The first place I lived was 44 Kadettenweg, the SS compound, and straight down the street from it, houses that became barracks for officers. And I lived at 44 Kadettenweg with some other officers from the 111th. Not the colonel. I don't recall where the colonel lived, but that's where we were. And I stayed there until some families started to come, and that was an ideal house for family. So I was moved to 135 Potsdamer Strasse in Lichterfeld West. And it was a large old Victorian kind of house. That's probably why I live in Victorian houses in Cincinnati. A large old Victorian kind of house. And I was a non-drinker, non-smoker, but our motor officer, he'd go to parties throughout Berlin, and we put a bar in the house, a beautiful bar. We put a bar in the house, and when whatever party he was attending was over, he'd come with the remains of that party at whatever hour and I'd run downstairs and collect anything we had of value and take it back upstairs. But the thing I remember about that is we had a bottle on the bar that said Burns Bottle.
Oh.
At the end of an evening, we went around and I went around, collected all the unconsumed drinks. They were poured in this bottle. And the rule was if somebody could take a drink out of Burns' bottle, it was too late. No more drinks for them. Oh my.
My
Oh, those
goodness
experiences, you think back, you don't think about them, but then you stop
Yeah.
and look back.
They start-
So my military service was really super.
Well,
It was a
it was.
great education.
Yes. Did you pick up a bit of the German language?
No, I could go into the kitchen and say to the gals there, "Wasserkuchen."
What's cooking?
But no, I did not pick up German language. I really didn't have that much interface with Germans
Oh, I wondered.
because the few people we had who supervised Germans spoke English. And of course, in Berlin, the medium of exchange was cigarettes, and I didn't smoke.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if cigarettes went for less than $100 a carton, I did not dispose of them. But I've seen cigarettes go for $300 a carton.
right.
Money wasn't good for anything, although, what was the government kind of operation that was set up? General Clay's office and his shop.
Oh.
And Mrs. Clay, I think, was involved in setting up an exchange where you could go in and turn in cigarettes for currency, and you could buy things. Some things that the Germans had bought in and so on. I don't know who ever smoked the cigarettes, because even cigarette butts were of value.
Oh, we picked them up.
And it was, but that was a medium of exchange at that point in time. But no.
Americanish was very, very much, very popular, wasn't it?
Oh,
by
absolutely,
those
absolutely,
people.
absolutely.
Anything American.
Right.
Because they knew it was good, first class.
No
Well,
question.
now here you are in Germany and Berlin, and you were there, what, several months?
I was there from the fall of '45 until April of '47.
Oh, wow.
I came home in April of '47.
My goodness.
And then stayed on in the reserve after I left active duty until 1953. Serving with the 30th Corps headquarters right over here,
Over
Fort
on-
Thomas,
Oh, in Fort Thomas.
30th Corps Artillery
Okay.
headquarters in the
Oh, yeah,
reserve.
Yeah. Well, your connection, of course, really made such an impression on your life, and your interaction not only with your fellow soldiers, but then with the officers, and then with the foreign people where you were. And Jerry, I just think you had an outstanding experience. What did it do for you when you came back?
Well, when I came home, I did not go to Wittenberg. Instead, I applied to MIT, and
GI Bill?
yes, the GI Bill was great assist to all of us. Of course, tuition at MIT then was $600. I have no idea what it is today, and I should know because I spent 30 years as an MIT educational counselor. But that I stopped several years ago. But no, the GI Bill was enabled us to do.
It was the rebuilding of the nation, really.
Yeah, it was really great. And I was, again, I tell you, in all honesty, I have been richly blessed at every step.
Yeah.
Did I take the best advantage? And the answer to that is no. But I suspect many of us may say that.
Oh, I should say so.
But at any rate,
Then, Your family life, you met your wife?
Well, after I left school, I was offered by a small soap company the opportunity. They told me I could go to Ivordale in Cincinnati or to Quincy, Mass. And the people in Massachusetts were basically cold by my Midwest standards. Of course, I chose to come to Cincinnati to Ivordale, where I made Dreft, Does, Ivory Snow, and Ivory Granules.
Wow.
And I did that for a couple of years before moving to the General Electric Company in the aircraft engine business. And I stayed there for nearly 40 years.
Really?
But one of the assignments I had there was the marketing of engine rebuild, the overhaul of aircraft engines. One of our major clients, customers, at that time it was military, not commercial, was at Oklahoma City Air Materiel Command in Midwest City, Oklahoma. And I met my wife at First Methodist Church in Oklahoma City.
How about that?
When I stopped going to, a couple of years later, when I stopped going to Oklahoma on that assignment, she joined me in Cincinnati.
How about that?
And we had 2 great children and 4 grandchildren. We have a son, Gerald Ramey Burns. I'm Gerald Spriggs Burns for my mother, and he's Gerald Ramey Burns for his mother, because my mother did not choose to have me called either Junior or Little Jake.
Yeah.
And my dad was called Jake. His name was Gerald with no middle name. So that's a derivation of that. And Jerry is an MIT graduate with a couple of degrees, more than I had. UC graduate first.
Really?
In architecture.
Is he with GE?
And he is a registered architect, but he has a degree from Sloan and a degree from civil engineering at MIT. And our daughter, Adrian Elizabeth, is 3 years Jerry's junior, and
She lived here?
she graduated from the honors program at UC and did her studies in Middle East studies at Harvard. And so they were both in Cambridge at the same time,
Sure.
which was great because Jerry had a 6-year program leading in. So they ended up being there at the same time. So we purchased a condo where they could both live. Adrian, of course, Adrian is married, lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband, and they have 2 sons, now 7 and 5, soon to be 8 and 6. And our son is married to a Cincinnati gal, Arlene Henke, and we have 2 granddaughters, 5 and 3. So
Well, I met your son out at the
they're
airport,
here.
you know.
They're here.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Jerry's restored an old home on Riverside Drive, but as we have left our home in East Walnut Hills, Jerry and Arlene and the girls are going to go to the house we've been in for 50 years.
Oh, wow.
And,
How nice.
and we're living totally on Riverside Drive in a great old Victorian.
Okay.
So
Gee. Well, your family connections and what you've produced is remarkable too. And you talk so proudly of your children and their accomplishments.
no.
No?
Wouldn't swap them for anything.
Oh.
But you wouldn't swap yours for anything either.
Of course not. That's right. That's right. Well, you know, looking back on your military career, did you keep close touch or connections with some of your fellow
You know,
soldiers?
we've lost contact over the years.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah.
I did on a very limited basis early on, but very quickly, no.
Yeah.
And that's one of the tragedies of my life. No, it's not a tragedy. One of the facts of my life is that as I moved from this career to the next career to the next career, I've attempted to turn the page. Now, on the other hand, this September, I'm going to go back to Springfield High for our 65th high school reunion.
That's great.
Although at MIT, I did not go to our 50th, but my very close associates from my class, and I was a politician. At MIT, I was the junior class president, head of the junior prom, head of the sophomore prom.
Sure.
And Technology Christian Association. I did that kind of thing at MIT, but my close associates there are all deceased.
Oh, really?
All deceased.
Isn't that
So I'm accustomed to being the last survivor.
Yeah.
Not only with my own family, but at Springfield High, I still have still living, the young fellow where we played back and forth together, with houses within a stone's throw of each other.
Neighbors.
So I'll renew that acquaintance again.
That's nice. That's very nice.
And I have at the Springfield Masonic Home a fellow who is next door neighbor, and this fall I will call on them, Gordon McOwen, who's a Tyler of one of the Masonic lodges in Springfield.
Okay.
Not my lodge, but one of the Masonic lodges in Springfield. So I have those contacts, but by and large, I've moved from this chapter to the next chapter to the next chapter.
I understand.
And
You know, something that stuck in my, that rang a real bell with me when you mentioned the name Thurber. Thurber.
yes, George Thurber.
Was he any relative of the
I can't tell you.
writer?
I don't know the
cartoonist
answer
from
to that
Columbus?
question.
How about that?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I'll be there.
But he was
It's an unusual name.
he was a great fellow, and of course I had when that transition occurred, I had I really hadn't I don't know what my total thought process was at the time, but I declined the offer and came to the fork in the road.
Sure.
And
There you go.
also,
Absolutely.
when it came time to come home, Colonel Kellum, of course, ultimately came home and was replaced by Nathaniel Gage, a much younger officer, and I came home on the same ship with him. He was the CO of troops on the ship, and I was sick in my bunk all the time. I'd get up. He'd go. We dined with the captain. He'd call me in time to come to our sitting because I'd get out of bed and do that. I did not get my sea legs at all. We came home on the General Stewart, but the weather was extremely bad, enough so that we turned around and went back to the Azores because we had some people who were seriously ill. I did not get that seriously ill, but
Oh my gosh.
the colonel liked to play cribbage.
Oh yeah.
And in Berlin, I had played cribbage with him. I couldn't sit up for a hand of cribbage. My life depended on it. Oh my!
Oh, that must have been miserable. Were there a lot of Ohioans in your, like in the 63rd or in your?
Oh, there were.
Did you?
But Norman Saum, S-A-U-M, from Springfield, an older fellow, went in at the same time I did, and he was in the 63rd at one point. Ralph Early from, gee whiz, where was Ralph from? He ended up being a pharmacist in Michigan. I haven't been in contact with him for many years. Gentlemen,
Okay,
and you we're talking about staying in touch.
yes, staying in touch, reunions, that sort of thing. No reunions.
I have not, and the 63rd has had reunions. As a matter of fact, Donna Brandel, who was in my class in Springfield High, her husband was in, and they have gone to the 63rd reunions religiously. But no, I have not.
There is an association, I'm assuming, the 63rd, and they give you.
Let me
they
say
send you
there was an
literature.
association, there may still be.
Yeah, right, right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know. Well, those things are dwindling, you know,
But for the ones of us who remain, it's sort of like my high school situation. You know, I think we're going to go to the 65th.
I think that's
although,
wonderful.
Although some of my closest friends I know have passed away
Yes,
because
yes.
I've kept enough tabs at that.
Yes.
But, you know, hey, we're living this life now, not some past life. And, but we now may have a little more time for reflection. And therefore, as these opportunities come up, we'll go and say hello to people.
That's right. That's right. Well, you know, you brought up a very important point, and as you said, you get to a fork in the road, and you take one, and you just can't dwell on what you might have done by taking the other one.
Right.
That is so important in life. Some of us tend to dwell too much on the past, myself, but being a historian, that's another story. But anyway, the thing about your connections and so forth is that even those people, they made an impression on your life.
Oh, hey.
Your colonel, for example.
And not only did they make an impression on my life, I made an impression on their life.
Exactly right.
You know?
Exactly.
You know, and in the at Camp Van Dorn, I was the fellow who got designated to keep the display, to create and maintain the display in the day room that showed where we were in Europe and Asia and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and once a week I'd give an orientation. Here's what we know, here's what we've learned, here's what we think is happening. So
Yeah.
I've had, you know, a great role.
Well, you really
And
have.
it's been fun.
And you know, you bring up a point that has always impressed me so much, and that is in those days, we didn't know what was going on exactly. Maybe it took 2 weeks to get news about a big battle or something, or you'd see a headline in the Stars and Stripes or in a newspaper, and it would say Allied forces fighting the Nazis, and it wouldn't tell you exactly where.
No.
Security was very important in those days.
That's right.
How different it is today when we know exactly what's going on everywhere in the world at the moment.
Yes, and you know what? It makes an awful lot of armchair generals
Oh boy.
who aren't qualified to be armchair generals.
Exactly right.
Unfortunately, we've got an awful lot of them in Washington
In
who are
high
not
places.
qualified.
In high places.
I think it is pure tragic
It is.
that people are behaving as they behave.
Absolutely.
We have one president, we elected him, I don't care how we got him there, he is the president of this
That's
country and ought to be respected as such.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
I'd be ashamed of myself to say some of the things that people have said.
oh my goodness, I should say. Well, that I'm so glad to hear you express yourself that way, which I would expect anyway.
Well, and I've been part of the political system. I've spent a stint as the chairman of the 3rd Ward here in Hamilton County, in City of Cincinnati. I was a precinct executive for many years, and at the beginning of my tenure there, you used to go door to door to see people. You don't do it anymore.
Yep.
Well, I suspect in some places they do, but I haven't been a precinct executive in a good number of years now.
Right.
But no, I played the political game
Of course.
and the volunteer game.
Absolutely. Well, this is part of being a citizen. You know?
Oh,
My goodness.
absolutely.
I mean, we all have contributions to make because we're here and we're taking advantage of this and that. Jerry, we're winding down here rapidly, and I'm sorry to say, you and I could talk forever, I think, but your final reflection, say for example, on how you felt and have felt, you've expressed a bit of it right now, of course, with politics being the way it is, but you know, getting back to the States from Europe and having seen the devastation and everything, how did you relate that to your family and your friends?
one of the good things about doing this is they have, you know, at some question would come up, and I've mentioned something, but there's no way that you can really communicate what you saw. When I was the disaster chairman and the vice chairman of operations at the Red Cross here, I had occasion to go with Paul Christensen to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, to see the devastation that occurred in floods there. Some 24 caskets had been exhumed from a cemetery and floated down the river. Houses that had just been washed. Now, I've seen that, but I find that is even difficult to share, because unless you see it, and an officer of the bank, we went into the bank, is there something we can do? And he said, you know, there's not really anything you can do. They were washing out their file cabinets, the mud out of their file cabinets with hoses. And he said, there's no way that you can really appreciate what we're doing without doing it.
That's right.
And I'm afraid that's what it is. The reason we fight wars, I think, in part, is because we don't really appreciate what it means.
I know it.
What it means. And somebody has said, the great thing to do would be let the moms sit down and negotiate, and we'd get things resolved. And there may be some truth in that.
Well, there may be some truth in that, but of course I've always felt, you know, as long as man exists, it's going to be something like this.
Yeah.
You know, today there are 127 wars going on around the world. You know, 127. Some
That's
of
a
them are
lot.
little brush fires and things, but here, there, and everywhere. It isn't just Iraq. And people, a lot of people don't realize that.
But on many of our city blocks, there's a neighbor down the street who we may have a truce with. But it's the same thing. It just
Of course. Oh.
matches the size of the box.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. Well, this has been a great, great experience, Jerry Burns, and I can't tell you how much it will mean to people who will see your DVD, because your family gets gets one from this interview, and a copy goes to the Library of Congress Archives in Washington, and a copy stays here in the archives of the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And you're on record now forever. Whether you like it or
For
not.
good or for bad. But Ted, I have to tell you this. I appreciate the opportunity to get and talk with you. And I would not have met you had Jerry not thought, I'm going to take Dad
Out to the airport.
on a B-17 ride.
How about that?
You know?
I know, isn't
And
it?
I'm grateful to that young fellow, because I know that he has to wonder how meaningful was doing that. And of course, it's turned out to be quite meaningful, because this was a bonus. I would not have done this.
Well,
No way I would have done this.
I know we wouldn't have met, you know, and because you wouldn't have done it, I wouldn't have known about you or got you in touch with Dennis or whatever. And so here we are, and your expression has been so wonderful and so colorful and so meaningful, and I know that everybody who sees it will appreciate it so much, and we thank you very much.
While I wouldn't have a chance to do it on tape,
Oh yeah.
I do want to hear about your Navy experience.
Oh yeah, we'll get around to that sometime. Okay. We'll meet at Mary Bell's and have a couple of brews
At
or
Mary
something.
Bell's.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Well, thank you so much, and I think that winds it down here. And again, we thank Jerry Burns from the recently renamed Eastern Avenue portion called Riverside.
Riverside Drive?
I know. Did you have to change all your stationery and everything? And all?
I don't bother to change anything.
No, okay.
I don't bother to change anything.
All right, wonderful.